I'm Michael Essenburg of Close the Gap Now, and I want to talk with you about how you can help your students develop a Christ-centered worldview. How you can help your students develop a Christ-centered worldview. As Christian educators, we want our students centered on Christ. We want them to develop a Christ-centered worldview. So for example, we want them to connect what they study and what the Bible teaches. And a good way to help our students connect what they study and what the Bible teaches is to ask questions. Asking questions gets them thinking, gets them reflecting, helps them make connections. And you might be wondering, well, ask questions about what? Well, you can ask questions about the connection between what they're studying and creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. But what specifically should you ask? Well, here are 4 questions that you can ask. For creation, you can ask, what's God's purpose? God's the creator. He created everything. What's his purpose for the thing that the students are studying? For the fall, you can ask, what's wrong? Your students study things that reflect the fallout of sin. War, famine, discrimination, those sorts of things. When they're studying, encourage them to ask, what's wrong? And ask them yourself, what's wrong? For redemption, you can ask, what difference does Jesus make? Jesus came and he died. What's the impact of that? He rose. What's the impact of that? What difference does Jesus make? And for restoration, you can ask your students, well, what will you do? Jesus died for them. He's redeemed them. They should be involved in restoring all things. Well, what will they do? What action can they take? Now you might be thinking, well, I wonder what student responses to this look like. Well, we asked our 9th graders to make some connections using those 4 questions, and I've got some sample student responses that I can show you, tell you about. So we had a 9th grader made some connections on creation, fall, redemption, and nature, or plants. For what's God's purpose, she said, God created nature, or plants, to make earth beautiful, and for humans and animals, especially for food, nature shows God's creativity and careful planning. For what's wrong, she said, because of the fall, nature is misused. For what difference does Jesus make, she said, the source of broken nature is sin. Christ died for the sins of humans. And for what will you do, she said, as redeemed people, we should restore nature to its original purpose and beauty. Now, before you ask your students these questions, I would suggest you get some practice with them, you work with them, you see how they work. And 2 things that you can do are, you can identify something you want to apply creation, fall, redemption, restoration to, and then you can respond to the 4 questions. And I'll give you a little practice. So you might be wondering, well, what do teacher responses look like to this? Well, we had an English teacher at our school, and she applied creation, fall, redemption, restoration to the field of language arts and English. And here's how she answered the 4 questions. For what's God's purpose, she said, God made language so we could communicate with him and with others. Language helps us love God, love our neighbor, and take care of God's creation. For what's wrong, or the fall, she wrote, because of sin, we use language to exalt ourselves, harm others, and grab power. Because of sin, we miscommunicate. For what difference does Jesus make? She wrote, Jesus, the Word, used words to proclaim God's truth. He died and rose to free us from the power of sin. Because he redeemed us, we can use language as God intended. And for what will you do? She wrote, the English department will equip students to honor Jesus and impact the world for him. To do this, we will help students enjoy God's gift of language and use language to learn about God and his creation, effectively communicate, and bring shalom. So, if you want to help your students develop a Christ-centered worldview, get them to connect what they study and what the Bible teaches. You can do this by asking questions. You can do this by asking questions about creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And just to make sure we're all clear, those questions are, what's God's purpose? What's wrong? What difference does Jesus make? and what will you do?